So, Dr. Farrell, the Giza Death Star, the very first book of all, the founding book and name of the website. You know, the first thing I think is I've heard all these theories that it's an alien spaceship and one day the rocks will break apart and it'll take off into the sky. It's a harmonic resonance chamber. It's a power plant. It's a beacon for aliens that will one day return, or it's proof that human beings were seeded upon the earth by an alien species and left this technology behind, except if you get a pass and you go with your visitor's pass, it doesn't really look all that advanced, and I don't see any sliding doors or anything like that. So talk to me about how the Giza Death Star is different. What does it say?
Well, it's basically saying that the structure is full of too many dimensional analogs of local celestial space, and that this implies that it has some machine-like purpose. And when you look carefully at various features of the structure, including the use of nonlinear materials, stone, limestone, granite, when you look at the dimensional analogs themselves, it's implying a physics that is extraordinarily sophisticated, all right? Now, that's one half of the argument, just looking at the structure and looking at it more or less with an engineer's eye and with certain concepts in modern physics in mind. The other half of the argument is laid out in the other two pyramid books, particularly Giza Death Star Destroyed, and then in Cosmic War. The other part of the argument deals with texts that refer to mountains or ziggurats or acres in Akkadian and Mesopotamian languages, looking at these structures and noticing that in the text they are referred to in a context that either implies a war, that they're a technology of war, and that they are used in such a way by the gods or whoever you wish to call these people that are referred to in the text, that they're used as instruments of destruction in some fashion. It's quite a detective story. It's a radical, I fully grant, and I did this way up front in the first book. I said that this is a radical hypothesis. I even put a statement by Niels Bohr of Werner Heisenberg as kind of the epigram for the whole series. Sir, we're all agreed your theory is crazy. The question that divides us is whether the theory is crazy enough. So it's basically those books, those four books. Cosmic War is the linchpin. I've told people this over and over. It's the linchpin for all of my books, because it sets up the model by which I've been analyzing both ancient things and modern things, all right? It's an interesting and radical hypothesis, I grant you. And I'll say this, when I came out with it, almost immediately I was touching a raw nerve, because people within the alternative research community contacted me. They were very upset that I had said this, because it upset their apple cart of wanting everything that they were talking and saying about the glories of this very high civilization in high antiquity into a cocked hat, because what I was saying is that everything wasn't jonquils and daisies back then, which again, you only have to read the text to get that idea. It's an interesting, it's a radical hypothesis. I've also said if I had to do those books over again, I would do them in a very different way, because when I did them, I was hesitant in a certain sense to just let it all hang out there and put it all out there. I'd write them in a very different way. And I was also trying to set up in those books, particularly in the second book, how this physics is very, very similar to the type of stuff that began to be talked about in the interwar period between World War I and World War II by scientists and engineers writing about their theories in the interwar period. So there's a definite connection, I think, between what was going on back then and some of the fringe areas of alternative physics today.
So just to clarify, the Cosmic War is sort of the summary of your books in general,
Yes.
but specifically also of the three Giza Death Star books: the Giza Death Star, Giza Death Star Deployed, and Giza Death Star Destroyed.
Right.
But the Cosmic War seems to be making, if you take it, even if you took it with a grain of salt, it's funny that anybody would object, right? Because the ancient myths about an ancient civilization from which anybody would glean that such a thing ever existed are replete with warfare. And yet,
yes,
there is no description anywhere, is there, of an ancient civilization that was global in nature and it had no conflict, and there was a time of universal peace and tranquility on the earth until it magically disappeared, because if such a civilization existed, it probably would still exist, right? So why do you think this is really so controversial?
It's controversial for two reasons. First, because they want to have, in the alternative community, there's this idea that this ancient civilization is universal peace, love, and brotherhood, which of course is not what's said in the texts. So the other way that they have been getting around this, rather than look at the texts and trying to understand them as containing some kernel of literal truth, that there was a real war and it was really fought, and it was fought with horribly destructive weapons. This is clear time and again from the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the Mesopotamian texts that I look at, the Enuma Elish being the classic example of what's going on. The Enuma Elish is, in my opinion, a war epic. Okay? If you study that text in the academic setting, they will tell you it's a creation epic. All right? So in other words, they've already put it in your head. They've planted an interpretation in your head if you study it that way. So what they've done in the alternative community is they've tried to rationalize these texts as metaphors of naturally occurring cosmic catastrophe. Comets came, Immanuel Velikovsky. Comets came by, they wrought destruction on the solar system, on the Earth. You've got Zecharia Sitchin's version of Planet X or Planet Nibiru that comes careening into the solar system once every 3,000 some years and creates chaos and all of this stuff. Well, again, my problem with all of this is it's seeing too much. It's like C.S. Lewis said, and I talked about this in Cosmic War. It's seeing text in such a transparent fashion that everything becomes explainable as a natural catastrophe. And that means you're not trying to look at the actual details of the text and rationalize them in terms of some sort of reverse engineered physics, which is what I try to do in the Cosmic War. So let's look at what we have. The Giza Death Star trilogy is looking primarily at the structure, its anomalous characteristics, the Great Pyramid alone, okay? I'm not talking about other pyramids, just the Great Pyramid. It's looking at the structure, it's looking at it from an engineer's point of view. It's trying to say, why do we have all of these weird dimensional analogs of local celestial space and physical constants built into the structure? Well, the answer is you certainly don't need all of this claptrap to bury a pharaoh, all right? You would need it if you are attempting to build an oscillator to the structure of local space. That implies it's a machine, and it implies that it's a powerful machine, and it implies that it's using principles of physics that we're only guessing at. And I'll be very honest, I'll say I'm guessing at this, all right? The Cosmic War, on the other hand, is primarily concerned with the texts and with evidences that there are anomalous structures that you can see in local space. And that would indicate that there's some sort of civilization that was interplanetary in scope right here in our solar system. So that's basically the way I structured those books. And that was very deliberate and intentional. I decided when I did the Giza Death Star that if it was interesting and people read it, that I would continue to write about it until I thought that I had fleshed out the idea enough, and then turn to the texts themselves with the Cosmic War.